So today we're going to talk about the practical test standard. Okay, this is a this is the document that you will use as you for your Checkride. This is the document, the standards document that you use for your Checkride. We can get a free copy of this off the FAA's website. All you have to do there is type in glider pilot PTS and private pilot glider PTS or commercial pilot glider PTS, and you can get a free copy of it. You can also get it on Amazon for just a couple of bucks. Your Checkride is a I call it a pageant. Okay, a Checkride is not a flight; it's a pageant. It's not a flight where you can just do whatever. It's a pageant where there's a script and there are roles to play. You as the pilot are trying to get a certificate and demonstrate certain things. The examiner is trying to verify your knowledge on certain things and make sure that you are ready to do it. So I call it a pageant because it's not a normal, natural flight. Instead, it's very scripted as to what needs to happen. And the script is the practical test standard. Okay, and there's one of these for each level of pilot. You know, there's one for private pilot airplane, and this one is for private pilot glider, and you know, then there's one for commercial pilot glider, and there's one for flight instructor glider and whatnot. So there is definitely and that's what the examiner will use when they sit down with you to go do your Checkride. And this is what you're preparing for. So this contains all the subject areas that they're going to look at for questions and whatnot. Okay, and for what maneuvers you will do. This literally will show it. And it's broken down into these areas of operation right here. Areas of operation. And there's about a dozen of them. Some of these are done on the ground, and some of them are done in the air. And you generally do your oral portion first. You go through the oral portion where you where the examiner is asking you knowledge questions about different areas of flying, some of the regulations, decision making, and then there's the flying portion. And so let's just kind of go over some of the highlights right now. So you'll start during your oral portion. You'll get into the Checkride. They'll and we can discuss another time how to do that. But you're going to discuss some of the things that pilots need to understand: documents and certificates. Okay, you know, if I have a pilot's license, what documents do you have to have on the aircraft for it to be legal? What inspections does it have to have? Okay, weather information. Obviously, if you want to go thermaling, it has to be good weather, and the weather always has to be safe. Operation of systems, how the glider works, performance and limitations, aeromedical factors. You'd normally think you'd go normally straight to number 2, but that's actually kind of not what happens. This one is done a little bit out of order for what we would normally do. You go down to navigation, which is 8. That's part of it. Flight preparation and planning, National Airspace System. Okay. Then we can kind of go back to look at what, once you've gone through and discuss all the things you're going to discuss on the ground, that's when you'll go and you'll discuss things in the air. You'll actually go fly. But before you go fly, you do pre-flight procedure. So the examiner is going to, your examiner called a DPE, a designated pilot examiner, is going to look at how you pre-flight the aircraft, okay? And they'll want you to pre-flight the aircraft and observe you doing it and make sure that you're using a written checklist to do it. There'll probably be some questions on the ground about assembly before you fly, okay? How to assemble a glider, how to disassemble it, and whatnot. And you'll learn about that during the course of your training. And usually you'll be around and help somebody assemble or disassemble their own glider as part of your training. That's usually the way that training is done. Every glider is a little bit different, but there are certain things that are universal about getting the glider in the right position and getting the wings off and getting them in a trailer and whatnot, and then getting it back out again to reassemble it. Ground handling, okay? Getting the glider from usually where it's tied down out to where it's going to fly, and then back again. Okay, flight deck management, visual signals. It used to be cockpit management. Now they call it flight deck management. It seems a little pretentious for gliders, if you ask me. But that's okay. And then visual signals. And then you go over the airport and glider port operations, launching and landings, okay? And as you can see in section 4, area of operation number 4, launches and landings, you've got aero tow, ground tow, which can be either auto or winch, and as well as self-launch. And you only do one of these. Most clubs, most organizations, I think, do aero tow in the US. So this is likely where you're going to do it, okay? And you have these things that you have to demonstrate: ground tow or winch, okay? And then self-launch, okay? But you don't do all of them. You just do one of them. That corresponds to how you're flying. Landings, as part of it, everyone has to land. Performance airspeeds, soaring techniques, and generally that'll be one of them. And you'll see that in the notes, it'll say if you can't actually demonstrate it because of the weather, that you'll just talk about it. Performance maneuvers, there's only 3: straight glides, turnings to headings, and steep turns. That's it. Navigation, that's really done on the ground, because you're talking about flight preparation and planning, National Airspace System. Okay, back in the air, slow flight and stalls. Okay, and then emergency operations, simulated off-airport landing, which again is just something that they'll quiz you about on the ground. You'll see. Emergency equipment and survival gear, that'll be a quiz on the ground, and then post-flight procedures. Okay. So as you go through it, these are all the things that can pop up for you on your test, which when you actually break it down is actually not that much, okay? You'll go through what you need to on the ground, and then usually you only do 2 flights. Okay, usually do 1 flight to a high altitude, usually like 3,000 feet above ground. On the way up, you'll demonstrate everything you need to demonstrate on the tow from slack line. You look at it here. It's like let's say you're doing it on aero tow. Okay, you'll do 2. If you only do 2 flights, there's not that much time to do things. Okay, before takeoff checklist. Okay, you'll do a normal or crosswind takeoff depending on what's there. You'll be in the tow position. You'll do a slack line. You'll do a box to the wake. Okay, and you'll do tow release, and that's it. Okay, you do slack line and box to the wake on the way up. Boom, that's it. Okay, you get off. And then what do? You'll demonstrate, in the air, you'll demonstrate, show me a straight glide, show me a turn to a heading. Okay, do a steep turn. Usually you do two steep turns, one in each direction. We'll go over that a little bit more later. So show me slow flight and stalls. This is where people usually have issues because remember, you really have to clear the area with your steep turns and with your slow flight and stalls. And if people forget to clear the area, that's where I'd say probably the majority of the Checkride failures are the first time. And it's not the end of the world if it happens, but then you do have to take your Checkride again, and you have to take that part of the Checkride that you failed again. Okay, but you get up, you do your straight turns, your straight glides, your turns to a heading, steep turns, you do some slow flight and stalls, and you're almost done at that point. You demonstrate some flying maybe at minimum sync airspeed and speed to fly, and then you come in for a landing. And that's basically all you really have time for on a 3,000-foot tow. That's it. Okay, with your landing, normal and crosswind landings or a slip to a landing. Downwind landing, I think, is just would be briefed orally. And then for your second flight, it's even shorter, because what that one is probably usually that one is going to be your abnormal occurrence, which is a tow line break, and then you have to land back at the glider port, and the DPE will, just like your instructor, as you're learning this, will pull the release mechanism. Not at minimum altitude. They don't do it at 200 feet or whatever your minimum altitude is for your operation. They're not going to pull it right there because also they don't want to create an unsafe situation. So they'll pull it with enough time to make a normal landing back to the field. But with that, they can also, test you on things like that downwind landing, because you're coming up. There's a rope break. You have to turn around and land back at the field. Okay, and that's it. That's the entire Checkride right there. That is the entire Checkride right there. If you're coming with previous aviation experience, there's good news. There's this additional rating table. So if you have a pilot's license of any other kind, you won't have to do everything on the Checkride. Okay. You just look up what kind of FAA pilot certificate you already have, if you have one. Airplane single engine land, ASEL, and the legend is right here. You look that up, and let me zoom in a tad. And then it'll show you in these areas of operation things that you still have to do. And some of them, like the navigation stuff and looking at the airspace system, you don't have to do them. Okay, none. Okay, the maneuvers, generally you still have to do all of those, because even if you're a pilot in an airplane, which, it's like, oh, that looks like a glider. Well, but it's not a glider. It's not. So you can't really, they're not going to give you credit for those types of operations. But some of the things on the ground, absolutely, like talking about, certificates and pilot's licenses and privileges and things like that. Absolutely, they'll talk about that. That you don't have to do. Things like talking about airspace, again, don't have to do. But so that will make your Checkride significantly shorter if you already have that taken care of. So we're not going to hit everything here like super hard, but we will go ahead and just pick out some of the highlights, certificate and documents. They want you to understand what your pilot certificate gives you the privileges to do. talk about logbooks, medical fitness, and airworthiness of the aircraft. Does the aircraft have the right documents? Weather information, okay? Do you understand weather? Do you understand soaring weather? Do you understand how to get weather? You understand how to interpret it? They're going to ask you about, how does atmospheric instability affect, soaring? One of the things they are going to ask you about is what is the development of, what are the stages of a thunderstorm development, and where can you expect the more dangerous parts of that development cycle? Do you know when it's time to stop flying and pack it up and go home before the day turns from a great soaring day to a unfun thunderstorm day? You're going to be asked about, hey, about hail and how far away you should stay away from clouds, because how far away hail can reach. And the answer is 20 miles. The FAA wants you to stay 20 miles away from thunderstorms for both hail and lightning protection. Okay. Explain hazards associated with flight in the vicinity of thunderstorms. Okay. Here you go. Operations of systems. Do you understand a glider and its systems? And some people who are come over from airplanes say, well, it's basically the same thing, right? It's like, not exactly. It's not. Things like a yaw string, they don't have that on an airplane. Okay. Variometer and total energy compensators. What is a variometer? How does it work? What's the difference between a compensated and an uncompensated vario? What are they both telling you? Okay. High lift and drag devices, your spoilers, how are those different? Oxygen equipment. In airplanes, oftentimes that's kind of glossed over, because oftentimes an airplane, unless it's turbocharged, it can't reach really excessive altitudes. I've been in higher in gliders that I've flown than I've ever been in airplanes that I've flown. I've been able to soar up to, if I'd still been able to keep climbing, I would have, I could have gotten to 20,000+ feet in a glider, much higher than an airplane. So things like that, and the medical issues are related with high altitude flying. I'm routinely higher in a glider than I am in an airplane, and for longer periods of time too. Performance and limitations. Do you understand how to use best L over D? Do you understand the effective ballast on the aircraft? Do you understand how weight and balance is calculated for your glider? Okay, getting back to aeromedical factors. Okay, all these things, hypoxia, hyperventilation, all these issues, I see them more often in flying gliders than I do in airplanes. Okay, and that's where, this is a place where you use something like I'm safe, illness, medication, stress, etc., alcohol, fatigue, external factors, to talk about, are you medically fit to fly? We'll jump over to navigation, because that's also done on the ground here. Navigation. Okay, the applicant's knowledge of airworthiness will be evaluated through oral testing. It really should be at the front of the PTS, the practical test standards, but they put it here to kind of, I don't know. They should put it there. Okay, so you'll be tested on flight preparation. You'll be asked, hey, look, about aeronautical charts, which is what we talked about last week. Plotting a course, making checkpoints of when to go. Minimum flight altitude at go ahead points. How do you make a decision of go, no go? Once you're in the air, once you already decide to fly, how do you decide to go to the next waypoint, the next checkpoint that you're flying to? Explain the method of using lift sources. Okay, how do you find lift sources? Not the ones just next to your home, but how do you find them along a possible route. Selects available landing area, describe coordination procedure with air traffic control as appropriate. Okay, you'll be asked about the National Airspace System. You understand VFR weather minimums. You understand the different types of airspace, okay? Okay, and then quickly before we get back to the actual flying portion, okay, emergency operations. These tasks are knowledge only. So again, you're gonna be asked about these before you go flying. Simulated off-airport landings. What are the hazards associated with that? What are the things you have to consider? Emergency equipment and survival gear. You're gonna be asked about it. Hey, look, based on the time of year, you know, if you have to land somewhere, what are you going to need? What clothing, food, water, communication, okay? Emergency equipment and survival gear. You know, you might be asked about parachutes, okay? Equipment and gear appropriate for operation in various climates and other various types of terrain. Is it hot out? Is it cold out? Even if it's hot out in the summertime, is it going to get cold at night? Are you ready for that? Okay? You have a way to communicate. Okay? If you land out, are you going to stay with the aircraft or are you going to leave it? Hint, you're going to stay with the aircraft because an aircraft is a lot easier to find from the air than a person walking on foot. Okay? If you're truly land out in the middle of nowhere, it's going to be a lot easier to find you if you are with the aircraft. Okay. Pre-flight procedures. Okay, this one will be done orally as well. Assembly, they'll just ask you questions about it. If in the judgment of the examiner, the demonstration of glider assemblies and practical competency may be determined by oral testing, it will be. Okay, now they're going to start watching you though. Okay, this is where things actually start happening. Okay, pre-flight inspection. They're going to want to make sure that you inspect it using the appropriate checklist. Pull out the checklist and show that you're actually doing it. Again, I say it's a pageant. It's not just that you do the right thing, it's that you're showing that you're doing the right thing, that the examiner can see it and know, yes, this person is going to be safe now and in the future, okay? I can sign them off and other people can fly with them. Okay, inspects the launch equipment, including the tow line, tow hitches, weak links, and release mechanisms, okay? So once you're out on the line, you do ground handling and get it out onto the flight line, get ready to launch. You know, you're probably going to inspect the tow line. Walk along it just to make sure that there's no knots or any big cuts in it. Flight deck management, if you want to have all your stuff stowed properly. Visual signals, you know how to use the visual signals on the ground, starting with the hand gestures, you know, to hook up the glider, to, you know, open the hook, close it, and then and then you're using the proper hand signals. Okay, raise my wing. Okay, and you do the rudder waggles to tell the tow plane you're ready, and you take off appropriately. Radio communication, if you have radios on your, so most gliders now I think have radio okay, you're using the radio appropriately, you're using it at all, and then using it appropriately. Okay, flying the proper traffic pattern, whatnot. Okay, launches before takeoff check. Do you do your CBSIT, CBE, or your ABB, CCCDE checklist, whatever it is that you use at your operation? Are you using it? Okay, do you take off normally? Do you maintain tow position? Okay, and then, okay, slack line, boxing the wake. Just like in training, the examiner will set up slack line just like you're used to. When I actually took my private check ride, I flew both flights and I thought, oh man, he didn't even test me on slack line. I've been bouncing all over the place on tow, and he's gonna fail me on this. He didn't even test me on slackline. We got down, and I asked him, I said, you didn't test me on slackline. And he said, the day was so bumpy and you were bumping around so much, I got to see you doing slackline the whole time. And you were fine. And I was like, I thought for sure I failed. I did not. Also, tip, don't ask the examiner, why didn't you test me on this? They know what they want to test you on. And if they've seen you do the skills, they're not going to do it. Don't bring it up. If they don't bring it up, then you shouldn't bring it up either. So that's also the first time on my Checkride was the first time I ever had a rope break, and an actual rope break. It was at altitude, so it was fine. But again, it was a very, very bumpy day when I took my private Checkride in a glider, and I thought, oh no, I thought that was another area that I'd fail. It's like, oh my gosh, I broke the rope, and examiner didn't say anything. He's like, yeah, it's a bumpy day. It happens. Tow rope's right. You did fine with it. And so they'll check slack line, boxing the wake. You have to box the wake. Okay, tow release. Your second flight will probably be the one with the abnormal occurrence. Okay, tow line break. They'll cause the tow line they'll pull the tow line and say that's a simulated rope break. Okay, and that'll be what it is. They can ask you about these other things, but that's when they'll actually do. Okay, now you have your ground tow, which if you're at a winch operation or an auto launch operation, that's fine. Self launch, that's fine as well. Okay, if it's appropriate to that. I'd say most of the places in the US are aero tow operations. Okay, and each of those has their own issues that you will have done in training, and then you'll do them in the air. Landings for everybody. Okay, again, all these notes that appear before these things. If a crosswind condition does not exist, the applicant's knowledge of crosswind elements shall be evaluated through oral testing. What do you do if there's a crosswind? Okay, you have to do the performance maneuver for landing is a simulated off-field landing, in the sense that you have to touch down smoothly within a designated area with no appreciable drift and with a longitudinal okay, with a desired landing path, stopping short of and within 200 feet of a designated point. Okay, the applicant shall touch down and roll to a point designated. So this is basically, can you land in a field and not run into a fence at the end of that field? That's what this is testing. Okay, can you touch down and roll to a point designated by the examiner, stopping within 200 feet? At commercial level, it's within 100 feet, but you have to roll towards a point, up to it. So that's a fence, basically. So think of a barbed wire fence. You don't want to run into it. You could get within 200 feet of it, and then you have to stop. And you can use wheel brakes, okay? You land, you touch down, you roll, and then you use wheel brakes to come within 200 feet and stop within 200 feet of that point. Okay, as it shows, right, it says that the point should be far enough away from the touchdown point that it should not require more than light to medium braking to come to a stop within the required distance. Okay, it also says 120 meters here. That's an error. I've actually pointed that out to the FAA, and they've admitted that should say, it should have said 60 meters. So it's 200 feet is the actual value here. So can you land and roll towards a fence and stop within 200 feet and not hit the fence? Because you don't want to get, they want to show that you won't get hurt. Okay, slips to a landing. And if you do the performance landing on the first try, generally that's it. You don't have to do another, that'll be it. And then the second landing is part of a simulated rope break. Okay, slips to a landing. You may be asked to demonstrate that slip to a landing, and how you can do that in addition to spoilers or in place of spoilers if there is a spoiler failure. Okay, downwind landing. The task may be evaluated orally at the discretion of the examiner or it's done as part of a simulated rope break. Okay, they'll still ask you questions about it, but then if there is a slight headwind, then when you land back, there might be a slight tailwind. Performance airspeeds, minimum sink airspeed, speed to fly. You're going to be asked to, fly specific airspeeds in the air and you should know when to use minimum fly at min sync versus at best L over D or whatnot. Okay, soaring techniques. Generally, these are, you're going to be asked questions about all of them, okay? Due to varying geographical locations, atmospheric conditions may be asked to demonstrate at least one of them, probably only one, most appropriate for the particular location, and if conditions do not permit a demonstration, it'll be done through oral testing. Okay, you're going to be asked questions on all of these. Almost always, you'll be asked questions on all of these. Thermals, where to find them, how to thermal, what the techniques are. If someone else is in the thermal, which way do you turn in the thermal? The way that someone's already there, okay? If, where do you find them? Okay, over dark areas, places that are facing the sun, places that are going to be drier, ridge and slope soaring. Okay, you're going to be asked a question about, if you're ridge soaring, which way do you make all your turns? Away from the slope. If you're passing someone during ridge soaring, where do you pass them? In between the other glider and the slope, okay? Because you assume that they could turn at any moment. If you have to overtake someone and pass them, you always go between them and the slope, assuming that they might turn out at any moment and not tell you, okay? Wave soaring. You're going to be asked about wave, and you're also going to be asked about the rotor cloud, okay? Okay, then getting back into the air. Straight glides. Now here's where you start to see some of these performance, the standards for these. There was also in the landings area particularly, but straight glides maintain specific heading plus or minus 10 degrees and airspeed plus or minus 10 knots. They're just going to ask you to turn to they're going to ask you to fly and maintain an airspeed to show that you can maintain an airspeed. Turn to a heading. They're going to give you a compass heading usually, and they'll have you turn it, or they'll tell you to turn 90 degrees or to the left or to the right. You just look at the outside of your wingtip, and which is generally on at a 90-degree angle, and you turn towards that. Okay, maintain desired airspeeds plus or minus 10 knots, and roll out on a specified heading plus or minus 10 degrees. Steep turns. Okay, enter and maintain a bank. Okay, and also, by the way, this is something you want to be do your clear the area before you do it, but then enters and maintains a bank angle of 45 degrees plus or minus 5 degrees, maintains desired airspeed plus or minus 10 knots, and then you roll out, you go all the way around 360 degrees, and then you do a smooth coordinated roll out within 10 degrees of the desired heading. Okay, you pick a prominent landmark, you do a full 360 degree and roll out on that original heading with plus or minus about 10 degrees. Okay, plus or minus 10 degrees. And then you'll have a little pause, and then you'll do it usually to the other direction as well. Okay, navigation, again, that was done on the ground. Okay, slow flight and stalls. Clear the area. Okay, you'll do slow flight, maintain the heading, plus or minus 10 degrees, straight flight, and desired bank angle, plus or minus 10 degrees during turns. Okay, generally you'll be given slow flight, straight ahead, then you'll be given a turn, and then you'll be asked to recover. Stall recognition and recovery. Again, clear the area before you do it. Must be completed no lower than 1,500 feet AGL. Completed, not started, completed. Okay, stalls. Remember, we don't care if we stall at 10,000 feet. We got tons of time. We care if we stall in the pattern, you know, when we're getting close to the ground. So establishes pitch attitude, okay, with and without flaps, spoilers, or dive brakes. So most examiners want to see this maneuver done with spoilers open, and show that you can recognize a stall or an impending stall, and that you can correct for it, because the place you don't want to have it happen is you're getting ready to land. Maintain a specified bank angle of up to 15 degrees. That's nothing, okay? Most people always are like, oh, I'll put a big bank in there during my stalling turns. The PTS just says up to 10 degrees plus or minus 10. So that's it. You recover from the stall, okay? Lower the nose, level the wings, close the spoilers, you recover from the stall. Use smooth and coordinated controls throughout the maneuver, okay, to recover. And at the private pilot level, we want to see you, the stall actually break. At the commercial pilot level, we want to see the stall, just that you recognize it, and you recover before it actually stalls. But at the private pilot level, we want to make sure that you are comfortable enough with the stall, with how the nose will fall down, that it's not going to freak you out in the air, and that you'll properly recover from that. Emergency operations, we talked about that already. Those are knowledge only tasks. You're just going to talk about that. And then finally, okay, and then we talked about, you know, your second flight is the one where, so all that stuff, you know, the tow, slack line on tow, boxing the wake, doing straight glides, turns, steep turns, slow flight, stalls. That's one flight. That's it. And it's only like, with all those maneuvers, it's probably only like a 15-minute flight. Okay. And then you'll come in and you'll land. And then your second flight will be a rope break. And that's it. That's it. Post-flight procedures after landing and securing. When you're done, do you just, you know, do you properly take care of the glider? I've actually heard of someone failing for after landing and securing. They were used to flying at a commercial operation. They just walked away from the glider and left the canopy wide open and just assumed that someone else was going to take care of it. And the examiner was like, nope, that's not okay. So, okay, secures the glider properly. You know, did you close the canopy? Did you, you can't just walk away from the glider. You actually have to do something about it. You have to make sure it's in the right place, that it's tied down, or that it is, or that it it might have to be moved off get it off the runway, get it to where it can be tied down, where it should be tied down, so that way it's not a hazard to other landing aircraft or other aircraft that are using that part of the field. Okay, completes any prescribed checklist there. That's it. You know, a glider check ride goes fairly fast because thankfully there's not that many areas to do. There's only 11 areas total, and usually it's just done in 2 quick flights. Boom, boom. You'll spend more time on the ground talking about it, about safety areas, than you will actually flying and demonstrating safe operation. So if you ever want to know, if you're doing your training, you're like, man, how am I, what's the expectation when I fly on my check ride? Well, this is it. The practical test standard has all that in there, all of it in there. So all you have to do is look up, what is the standard that you're being trained to? Well, you're being trained to the practical test standard. So for, how am I supposed to do my, my steep turns? Okay, well, 45 degrees plus or minus 5 degrees is the expectation. Airspeed plus or minus 10 knots. Okay, And at the private pilot level, you'll see that plus or minus 10 knots a lot. Okay, straight glides plus or minus 10 knots, plus or minus 10 knots. Heading, maintain a heading plus or minus 10 degrees. Okay, and that's pretty typical throughout the entire document. But this is the document that you're being trained against. So if you ever wonder, what is the expectation when I go fly, it's all right here in the PTS. And a lot of times we'll look at the PTS at the very end of training, right before the Checkride, but this is, and so that can be a little confusing when you're a student. It certainly was confusing for me. But if you understand that your instructor has been using this document the whole time to know what to get you ready for and what the expectation is on that, then it's a lot less mysterious, because it's like, oh yeah, they've been training me to this standard the whole time. And when they ask you, hey, I need you to do that, that steep turn, don't do it at 30 degrees, don't do it at 60 degrees, I need you to do it at 45 degrees. There's a reason why. It's because that's what you're going to be tested on in the PTS. Okay? During your check ride. Okay. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So with that, that's all I really wanted to go over today. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. And as always, please subscribe to the channel so that way you can get more information on becoming a safe and successful and competent glider pilot.